Hi, I'm Sam from Dannells, and today I'm going to be showing you the technique of applying vinyl backing to a lampshade panel. So just to show you a shade and so you can see how this will look, this is fabric on the outside of the shade and then we have a neon vinyl on the inside. So I'm going to go through the technique just to show you what the vinyl looks like. It's this material here. We're going to be doing a gold today, which is really lovely and sumptuous. So that's our vinyl as it is. And I'm going to show you a really easy way of doing this. This can add quite a lot of point of difference to your shades. So as you can see from the gold, really shiny, neons, plains, really you can do anything to match whatever fabric it is you want to put on the outside of the shade. So I'm just going to pop this one to one side. So here I have the lampshade panel, and this is our lampshade making PVC. So it's got the self-adhesive on one side and this is where our fabric's going to go, but we're actually going to apply the vinyl backing onto this side, onto the white side. And here's my panel here, my vinyl backing, all cut to size. So to do this we need to use soap and water, and that's because the adhesive on the back of the vinyl backing is really sticky, and also we want to make sure that it's a really good quality job and that we have no bubbles or creases on the inside of your shade. So all we're going to do is use a really simple fairy liquid soap and water solution, and this is already pre-mixed in here. So you need around about 3 drops of washing up liquid to around about 250 ml of water. So I'm just going to pop some here into this plate. There we go. And first of all, I'm just going to make sure that my vinyl backing is going to cover my PVC panel. And yeah, that's covering over, so I'm happy with that. And just need some masking tape, so something you'd already have at home. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tape along the top edge. I've actually got a cutting mat here, a surface protector. You could do this direct onto your kitchen table, but it is good to have something there as well. So just pop in tape along, and that's going to kind of create a hinge for us. Okay, and I'm just going to flip that away and keep the panel in position. And then what we're going to do is with our sponge is just simply absorb some of the water. I'm actually going to just pop a little bit more in there. And again, you can do this with just any sponge you have at home. And I'm going to start to add that solution onto the back of the panel. And we need to make sure it's quite wet, so be generous. And what I'm also going to do is just do a little bit along the edge as well. I want to try and avoid getting the paper wet that's on the back of the vinyl backing, just because if it becomes wet it's very difficult to peel off. So we're just really just around the edges here as well. And the reason we're doing this is because when we flip over that panel we don't want it to stick to our cutting mat. So that looks nice and wet. I've been quite generous there with the water. I'll just dry my hands off. So, okay. So now what we need to do is take away the backing. There we go. And we're just very gently going to peel away the backing. So a little tip on a technique for this is if you just, rather than start in the corner, if you just make sure it's equal all the way along. And I just let it go and then again pull back. A tiny little bit caught there, there we go. Just pull back really gently, and I'm holding it with, as you can see here, with my right hand to make sure but I'm keeping the tension, and that makes the backing easier to pull away. There we go. And you can see how sticky that is. And basically what I'm going to do now is use that hinge. So I'm going to just take hold and pull it over. And what we want to do is that to just relax really gently on top of our PVC panel. And then we're going to use our squeegee here. Now this has a hard edge and it has a really nice soft, kind of almost velvety edge that we're going to help us remove that water. So just taking your panel very, very gently, as I said, and because you've put the tape on there, you've got a little bit of a hinge to work with, and you can actually put a little bit of tension on there. So I'm just going to pull that down. There we go. And that's just sitting on that. And I'm just going to lift this end just because it was looking a little bit creased, and the same here. Okay, so you can see that that looks quite bubbly, but we're going to remove those. That's just the water that's sitting underneath the vinyl panel. And you start in the centre and work outwards. So I'm just going to start squeegeeing that away. And as you can see, the water from underneath comes out really easily. So we're just very gently moving the excess water out towards the edges to give us a really lovely smooth finish. So the reason that we put the extra water around the edge of the panel is now the adhesive isn't stuck to our cutting mat, so it should be really easy to move and lift away. So I'm just going to remove these pieces of tape now. I'm just making sure that all the water is out. So now that we've adhered that vinyl backing to our PVC, just making sure all the water's out there, we just simply flip over and we're going to just take our scissors. So I'm going to use a non-fabric scissors here, just because it's plastic, and we just simply cut round the edges. So using the PVC as a guide, and this cuts away really easily. There we go. So our panel has now dried, and now I'm going to show you how we can make up a shade using our vinyl backed PVC. So we've got a really lovely woven fabric here, again with a slight shimmer in it, which is going to go perfectly with our gold vinyl. So you just need to position that on to your fabric, and this is with our backing side down, and we're just going to find our position and simply adhere that to our fabric. So peel away the backing paper. There we go. And around about 5 to 10 centimetres, and I'm just going to stick that in place. And using the base of my fist, I'm just going to apply that. And then simply pull away the backing and keep rubbing down. And all we're doing here is just ensuring that that adhesive backing sticks to our fabric. And this is going to make a really gorgeous luxury shade. Just get rid of this now. And if you have a panel with a kiss cut, that will already be in place, but if not, we have this self-adhesive strip. And I'm just going to pop this along the top and the bottom of our panel, just really to create a margin that we can then cut around. So just peeling off some of the backing, we're going to start at the top, and we just need to line up that with the short edge so it's nice and neat, and we're really just running that flush to the top of the panel. So just peeling away the backing as we go along, quite similar to what we've just done really with the actual panel itself. Just pulling that away a little bit at a time and making sure it's flush. And if you're making up a lot of shades this way, you can actually reuse these strips. So you can roll them up and they will keep their sticky for quite a while. So just going to cut that away neatly so it's flush, and then take away the backing there. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same on the bottom. I'm just going to turn this round just so it's a bit easier to see. So peel the backing away again. I'm just going to unroll that a little bit for ease, and then make sure that that's flush with the short edge, which it is. And all we're doing here with this self-adhesive strip is creating a margin at the top and the bottom of our shade that we can then tuck underneath the frame at the end, which gives us a really professional finish. There we go, we'll just snip that off again, just pop that to one side. So our next job is to now cut this out. So I'm just going to get my fabric scissors. You can use a craft knife as well, but do make sure that you've got your table protected if you feel confident with that. And all I'm going to do is just trim around using the edge of the PVC as a guide, and also the self-adhesive strip. So I'm just going to cut straight up the side. And just turn that around to repeat on the other short end. There we go. So that's all our fabric cut away from the edges. And as you can see, that's going to be the outside, and then this will be the inside. And then really carefully, I'm just going to remove the self-adhesive strip. So just gently removing that. We want to really avoid any unnecessary frays. If your fabric frays a little bit, that's kind of fine, but you don't want to kind of make that worse. So there we go. And as I said, these are reusable if you wanted to use them again in the future. And the same on this side. Just gently pull away. And just before we finish with the panel, I'm just going to take my high-tack double-sided tape. You can see that that's flexible and it's also see-through, and there's a reason for that as we move on. And all I'm going to do is just adhere that onto the inside. So in our case, it's onto the gold vinyl. And just simply run it down to the bottom, and then with my non-fabric scissors, I'm just going to snip away. And that is going to help us when we close up the shade. So that's our panel all ready to go now. And we just now need to move on to our frames. So we have two frames. We have a plain ring. These are 30 centimetre in diameter, so that's 30 centimetres across. And we also have our utility ring, which has an adapter in the centre that can be used for either a UK fitting, which is the smaller circle, or our European fitting, which is the larger circle. And what we're going to do now is we're going to cover those with tape. And simply, we're going to attach the tape onto the plain ring. And ideally what you need is for the tape just to sit so that the ring is in the centre. And that's why it's transparent. So we're just going to run that round. And I usually just do around about 5 centimetres at a time, trying to get that ring in the centre as much as possible. And this is what's going to hold our shade together. So as you come to the point where they meet, we just simply, I leave a little gap, and it's just so you can see the white of the ring and you can see where your join is. We're just going to snip that away. And then this is kind of quite an important part. We just need to push that tape around the ring. So really what we're doing is we're getting as much coating on there as we possibly can. Just push it all the way round. And once you've done the plain ring, then you can simply move on to the utility ring and do exactly the same thing. So I'm just moving it round. Then just snip that away again. I've just left a small gap so I can see what's what. And then with your fingers and thumbs, just roll that round. And this is one of our final stages before we start rolling the rings to create our lampshade. There we go. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to roll towards the tape, because that's going to be our seam that's going to join the shade together. Now, if you had a direction on your fabric, you would need to think about whether you want it to be a pendant light or a table light, because obviously the fittings sit differently. If it's a pendant light, you would need your utility ring at the top with the direction of your fabric pointing up. And if it was a table lamp, it would be the other way round. So the direction of your fabric would be pointing up. We don't have to think too much about that today because we've got a plain fabric. So I'm just going to position that there and that there. I'm just going to make myself a little bit of room here as well. And what I'm going to do is just remove the tape backing, which is actually red, from my ring. So there's my point where it's joined. And just be careful to be gentle and just pull away the backing and not the tape. It is very high tack, so it shouldn't come away. So I'm just going to position that like that, and then do the same on my plain ring. There we go. Okay. So just to roll our rings, just to mention two things. This section here needs to be facing inwards, and also just a little bit of advice, it's best not to get this spoke here on the edge. Ideally put it in the open section in the middle. And what we're going to do is simply position that on top of our vinyl and just make sure that that's in place, and then we're going to do the same with the other ring. And there we go. And what we're going to do is very gently just start rolling those rings, and kind of simultaneously I tend to move one a little and then the other a little. So just moving those forward. And as you can see already, the tape is doing its job. You can see how firmly that's holding. And now I can really take some control with my hands down at the bottom of the shade. And just keeping that moving. There we go. And I'm just going to pull that back a little bit because it was going a little bit off track, so you can do that. And then just as we reach the end, and again, I'm just going to make sure that that one is on track. It is. Just going to turn the shade towards me. And that's just because I want to get a little bit of control. It's a bit difficult doing it down at the bottom. If you do it from the top, it's a little bit easier. And I'm just going to remove the backing off our tape that's going to create our seam. There we go. And here at this point, I just like to make sure that this sharp edge, which forms the edge of the shade, just sits really flush. There we go, I'm happy with that. And the same at the other side, just to make sure, yeah, that's sitting flush. And then very gently, just press this down. We don't want to be putting too much pressure on at this point because it will bend and we don't want to damage our shade. So just turning it round, I'm just going to run along with my hand just to make sure that that seam is stuck. There's a tiny little fray there that I'm just going to snip away. Oh, that's it, it's just come loose from the top. Okay, and then if you have one, this is where a seam roller can be really handy. So you might have one of these at home already, or you can buy these from Dannells. So we're just going to really put a little bit of pressure on there and just make sure that that seam is really tight and closed. Okay, so now it's starting to look like a lampshade. So just before we go any further, the next stage is to just cut away where our seam overlaps. You'll see here, there's two little squares that kind of sit on top of each other. And what we want to do is on the inside one, we're just going to snip that away. And then just turning over, do the same here. You can see that the two squares are sitting over each other. And again, on the inside one, we're going to snip that away. And it just means that we haven't got any bulky double fabrics. So turning back to our open end where our plain ring is, just going to simply push the fabric over and just push it so it actually sits underneath the ring. And the tape under there should start to adhere that. And that's just getting us ready for the final stage. And this is creating a really beautiful, professional, crisp finish along the top. This fabric is quite springy, so it's just bouncing up a little bit. But we're just going to push that down the best we can, and then we'll use our tucking in tool for the next stage. Exactly the same along the bottom. We're just going to make sure that that pushes under. Don't worry too much about the spokes at this point. We just want to get that fabric pushed down. There we go. So we're now ready to finish off our shade. So our finishing tool, it has two long sides and a point, and then is serrated along the edge. And this is what we're going to use to tuck this excess fabric underneath the frame. So I always start on the open side because it's a lot easier, and just start at where our seam is here. And we're simply going to push, and I use the point to do this, push the fabric underneath. There we go, and it's just starting to go under. And you need to be a little bit firm with this, don't be too gentle. And you can also use the serrated edge to just simply push it towards the frame and get it started a little bit, and then finish it off with the point or the long side. And if this becomes a little bit bent, you can just simply take your scissors and just cut away to create a new point. There we go, so that's going underneath now. Like I say, you do have to be quite firm with it. The fabric that I'm using here has got a little bit of a fray on it, so we'll get all those edges in later. So then once we've finished our plain side, we turn around to the utility side, and exactly the same principle again. We're just starting at our seam and we're just simply pushing with our tool and tucking everything underneath. So just moving round, and we're going to come to a spoke shortly, so I'll explain how we're going to deal with that. And then as we reach the spoke, fabric scissors, just snip in, and then we're just going to turn around and do the third one. So really simple way of dealing with those spokes. So I'm just going to continue, tuck the fabric that's sitting either side of those spokes just behind. So really straightforward. There we go. And that's just tucking underneath now, really nicely, giving us that really nice professional edge. So there we have it. We've now got a really beautiful shade. I think you'll agree that that looks really luxurious with our gold vinyl backing applied to our panel and with this really beautiful blue on the outside. So that's the way, the technique to be able to put the vinyl backing onto your PVC panels for making a vinyl backed lampshade.